I want you to take a look at some of these shots, all recorded at 60 FPS. What do these all have in common? These were all captured on a $500 console, the PlayStation 5. Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is David, and today I wanted to talk about 30 FPS versus 60 FPS and if 30 FPS really is enough. I don't think so, and here's why. So the first thing is that 60 FPS, in my opinion, should be the standard this generation because we have already seen highly detailed games running at 60 frames per second, such as Horizon Forbidden West. And in fact, Horizon Forbidden West runs above 60 frames per second with a VRR enabled display. If you watch some videos out there on YouTube about Horizon Forbidden West at the performance mode, it regularly runs in the 70s to 80s depending on your location. And that is fantastic, and what we already expect from this generation. So if we got games like Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Ratchet and Clank, and even games like Fortnite using Lumen, which is ray tracing global illumination, and Nanite running at 60 FPS, if we can get those games to run at 60 FPS, why can't we get Redfall to run at 60 FPS? Why can't we get Starfield to run at 60 FPS, right? Why can't we get Gotham Knights to run at 60 FPS, all right? I'll tell you why, because of poor optimization. I've seen a lot of people talking about Starfield, for example, how the game is very CPU intensive, and that's why it can't run at 60 FPS on the consoles, and that is very true. It is CPU intensive. That's why it can't run at 60 FPS, but that is not the issue of the game. That is the issue of how the game was developed and what engine was being used to develop that game. That's up to the developers who are designing these games to better optimize the game for the hardware that we have. All right. The excuse of the hardware not being good enough is not a good excuse. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at Bethesda games as a whole, the games run like trash even on high-end PC hardware because the creation engine, for example, is a super old engine and is not able to keep up with today's hardware. Same with Unreal Engine 4 games. All those Unreal 4 games are not able to keep up with today's hardware because those Unreal 4 games are CPU bound, and the developers don't know really how to prioritize the CPU cores better. Another reason why I think 30 FPS is just not acceptable in this day of age is because we have OLED. I have an OLED screen personally, and if you don't know what OLED is, it is a screen technology that has self-emitting pixels that emit their own light, and it provides like a super nice contrast, but it also provides instant pixel response. So that means you don't get any motion blur at all. It's literally like 1-to-1. So when you're watching a 30 FPS video or playing the game at 30 FPS, it is very jarring to watch that content in 30 FPS because of the lack of motion blur on that OLED screen. So when you play at 60 FPS, the difference is night and day versus playing on something like a LED screen. Also, there is an input delay using 30 FPS. This is why PC gamers usually strive for 120 FPS or higher, because the higher the FPS, the more responsive the game feels. Now, there is a little bit of a difference between using a controller and using a mouse and keyboard. Obviously, with the mouse and keyboard, you want that instant response. So the higher FPS you get, the better. That's why PC gamers are usually going for 120 FPS or more because of that mouse responsiveness. You want that instant response. However, if you are using a controller, you don't need as much of that input. You don't really notice it too much. Like, I really cannot notice too much of a difference between 60 FPS and 120 FPS. input lag on a controller. There is a difference, don't get me wrong, but it's not a massive difference. It's not as massive a difference between 30 FPS and 60 FPS. That type of difference you can definitely feel with a controller. So I would say that it is definitely important to have 60 FPS because of the input delay that is inherent with 30 FPS. And especially if you're playing a first-person shooter. So that's all I got to say. Thank you guys for watching the video. Go to like, subscribe, and God bless.